Okay.
Oh, I think I got it now.
Oh,
Now we can hear you.
Now, okay, now we can hear you.
Okay, now everybody can hear? We're all good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I was saying the focus of the first panel was on the challenges the industry faces with diversity and inclusion and why it's so important that it tackle these. Today's panel takes the next step. We're going to be talking about some of the grassroots efforts to promote greater diversity and inclusion in the thoroughbred industry, and also in another sport that's faced some of these similar challenges, the sport of ice hockey. You're going to hear pretty extensively from our panelists down the road a piece, but just to let you know who you're going to be hearing from. They are Renee Hess, who is the founder of the Black Girl Hockey Club, Leon Nichols, who co-founded the Project to Preserve African American Turf History, and Ron Mack, who runs the Legacy Equine Academy. I also want to give a shout out to my colleagues who helped create this panel series and have done so much work to make this happen. Alicia Hughes of the National Thoroughbred Racing Association, and teacher and freelance journalist Teresa Gennaro. Finally, we must acknowledge we're doing this event in the aftermath of yet another horrific mass shooting that took place yesterday in Atlanta, in which 8 people were murdered, 6 of them Asian American women. Our hearts certainly are with the people of Atlanta and with the Asian Americans throughout the country that feel victimized by yet another of these mass shootings. And I know some of the folks here today wanted to say a couple words about that. So I'm going to shut up now and I'm going to let them do that. And Alicia, why don't you step up to the plate?
Yeah, like you said, just want to obviously express, let our Asian community know that our hearts are with them. I know, while recognizing that the current situation is still a fluid one, and there are still facts coming out, we need to acknowledge that this horrific event took place during a time when, hate crimes have been on the rise for the Asian community, anti-racist, or like I said, hate crimes in general have been on the rise. So like I said, it's just completely gut-wrenching. Too many people have known the pain of having to get up and go about their day like everything is normal, knowing that their own people have been murdered. We know that pain. We know how that feels. And so to everybody in the Asian community, know that we are with you. Our hearts are with you, and we are thinking of you. And, we stand with you in solidarity.
Lisa?
I think I would add that marginalized communities don't live in a vacuum, that even though we're here tonight to talk about the participation of Black people in racing in the past and now, whenever a vulnerable community gets attacked, I think all vulnerable communities share the fear of what it means to go about their day-to-day lives under threat. And Alicia, as you said, over the last year, far too many Asian American people have had to deal with the fallout of the racial approach to COVID-19, and just wishing, these words are trite, peace and healing to our friends in the Asian American community.
Renee, anything you'd like to say here?
I would just add, that acts like this are rooted in sexism and racism. And, we've got to make it a point to acknowledge that our brothers and sisters in the Asian community are hurting right now. And as a person of color, as a Black woman, I know how that feels. And so, I've made sure to reach out to my Asian friends and let them know that I'm here just to listen, to vent to. And I would encourage folks to do the same and to put your words to action as well, because there are a number of organizations out there that are doing the work in the Asian community that can be supported, whether it's monetarily or, just amplifying those voices. And, the acts are abhorrent and terrifying, as you said, for all marginalized communities, because these acts are not in a vacuum. These acts affect all of us. And I think the quicker that we realize that, the quicker that we can hope to address issues of violence and white supremacy in the United States and North America.
Ron?
Well, I agree with the words that have been spoken at this point, and I agree and support all of the opinions. It shows that even in 2021, there's still a lot of work to be done to address diversity and inclusion, as we're speaking of today, and the racial inequality and the abhorrent violence that's been demonstrated here in the last 48 hours. So we must bind together with all races and must move forward to have a greater calling to develop a better world all around.
And Leon.
Yeah, I just want to extend my sincere condolences to family members and anyone who has to endure this type of pain. But it speaks to a bigger microcosm in terms of what's needed in this country, which is why panels like this are extremely important as it reflects on diversity and inclusion, because we are a growing, diverse country and nation. And, it's some of these acts are spurred on by the rhetoric that gets promoted. And recently, far too much from our political leaders. So we just, again, it's very important for panels like this to really speak out against and really drive a narrative of diversity and inclusion.
All right. Thank you all on that extremely somber topic and the somber day, somber couple of days, certainly in the aftermath of that. Let's see if we can turn our attention to talking a little bit about how grassroots activism and activity can drive change in the wider world of the sports that we inhabit. And maybe, Renee, let's start with you, if we could, and maybe tell us a little bit about the Black Girl Hockey Club and some of the things you're up to.
I'm so excited to be here and just to be included on this very important discussion on thoroughbred racing. I'm not an expert on racing, but I have been an expert in the grassroots movements in sports. And so I'm the founder and executive director of the Black Girl Hockey Club, which is really a community space for Black women in the sport of ice hockey. And it started as a passion project, just me looking for community in a sport that is predominantly white, in a space like an ice hockey arena that is predominantly white, looking for a place where I can belong and I can share my love of this sport with other folks who have the same cultural background as me. And, we started as a fan club, as a space just to kind of get together and hang out. And as we grew and gathered in numbers, we realized that we have the opportunity to address some of the real gatekeeping that comes with this sport. And, that includes hiring disparities, financial gatekeeping, and of course, the lack of representation in this particular sport. And I think a lot of these topics overlap with what is happening right now in thoroughbred racing, and talking about the rich history that people of color and Black people in general have in these sports, talking about the need for representation in all levels of these sports, I think is a really important topic that can cross the boundaries of our particular sport and really make a difference when we're talking about how to best diversify and make equitable these sports that we love, that are part of us, but perhaps do not have faces that look like ours out in the stands and on the fields and in the front offices. And so that's what Black Girl Hockey Club is all about. It's about creating a community, not just for Black women. I always say that you don't have to be Black and you don't have to be a girl to be part of Black Girl Hockey Club. You just have to support our mission, which is to create a community space for Black women in ice hockey.
Renee, could you just briefly maybe touch on like an achievement or two that the club has experienced in the couple of years you've been doing this?
Yeah, so when we got started back in 2018, like I said, we were just a fan group. A bunch of hockey moms, hockey players, hockey fans, and hockey journalists of color who were looking for community space. And as we grew and we got our federal designation as a nonprofit organization, one of the first things that we wanted to address was the financial gatekeeping that young Black players encounter when they are becoming more involved in the sport of ice hockey. And so one of the first programs that we launched was a scholarship program. And I'm really proud of the scholarship program. We worked really hard to put that together. Our program is very targeted. We are focused on providing scholarships for Black girls who play in travel hockey teams ages, let's see, I think it's 9 through 18. And we have had applicants from all over the world. We just gave away 7 scholarships in winter, 4 scholarships in the fall, and 1 last summer. So our last group of scholarships for winter had 7 young girls all across North America, including Canada. And we even had an applicant, an awardee from Kenya who plays ice hockey out in Africa, which I think is so amazing because, spreading the love and the joy of hockey across the world in various Black communities is going to be so important as we try to grow the game and as we try to bring more diversity to the sport. So our scholarship program is something that I'm really proud of. We've had a lot of support on that end from individuals and the professional leagues and professional teams wanting to help us make this goal of providing multiple scholarships every year something that we can sustain, not just now, but in the future as well. And so we also do digital events, panels such as this that focus on equity in sports and in media and in other aspects of ice hockey, including the front office. We have been able to host events out in the real world back when we could do things like that. And so, we've been really lucky to be able to grow this community and build this network of BIPOC fans in hockey over the last couple of years. And I anticipate us continuing to grow because, with racialized incidents, just like the one that happened in Atlanta yesterday, with incidents like the Black Lives Matter movement picking up steam last summer because of the murders of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and Jacob Blake. Those types of things require community, right? Because we can't all do it on our own. We can't expect marginalized communities to just bear this burden on their own. And so an organization like Black Girl Hockey Club is gathering our allies, gathering our co-conspirators, gathering folks who believe in the mission of inclusion and equity, and utilizing that power and those voices to facilitate change.
All right, good stuff. Ron, you guys are, she was talking about scholarships. Obviously, you guys are working very closely. You're working with kids on the ground. And I wonder if you'd tell us about the Legacy Equine Academy.
Well, first, I'd like to take a moment and thank you all for giving us the platform to discuss a very important national subject of equity and inclusion. To tell the legacy story, I would be remiss if I didn't give you a little backdrop regarding our history, and I'll be as brief as possible. But here in Lexington, Kentucky, is where really thoroughbred racing was born in a lot of ways. And as a kid, I literally lived on the grounds of one of the school systems to just do that. And so what have we done? We offer tours to our young people from 6th grade through 12th, a full curriculum. We have the Legacy Equine Academy camp, and we have industry folks that our kids have an opportunity to co-op with, to have mentorships, and to build alliances. And we have developed a great number of relationships within the industry and corporately and within the general community. And so we have an end game here, though, folks. As our kids migrate through the pathway, the pipeline that we offer, we do have scholarships available to our young people who are interested in equine and agriculture studies. And so we have given out several scholarships. We just had a ceremony just 2 weeks ago. And one of our recipients a couple of weeks ago had gone all the way through the program in these last 5 years. And so we were very excited about that. And we also develop relationships in the industry to where we offer jobs to our kids professionally in the industry. And so we have really demonstrated what can happen and demonstrated success when a kid gets interested in something that they may not otherwise have access to. And so that's what we endeavor to do at Legacy Equine Academy, is bring a new audience to the thoroughbred industry. And we endeavor to develop a national footprint, grow globally to be a recognized organization. Ironically, thoroughbred racing can really be considered the first sport to demonstrate equity and inclusion. Those jockeys that I had mentioned were not only jockeys, but they were trainers. They were owners, as a matter of fact, and they held a power and influence in the culture of the thoroughbred racing. How about that? Even in the late 1800s. And so as we honor and celebrate the glory of the past and the success of those Black jockeys, at the Legacy Equine Academy, we're training and cultivating our kids for the future of the sport. And because they are the next generation in the industry. And so we're educating these young people to deliver economic impact by becoming owners, C-suite administrators, and executive level industry leaders for our future. And so we're excited about that, about the sport that African Americans helped build and helped develop, and to circle back and offer African American kids these opportunities that they have ownership of in the way of their heritage, their lineage. And so we're so excited about what we have accomplished in these last 5 years, but we're even more excited about what the future holds in helping to develop the industry, to grow the industry to a new audience of young people to keep the sport as great as it's always been.
Ron, you mentioned getting some of the kids going through and then getting internships or jobs. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of those relationships and some of the places where they may end up.
Absolutely. We have a relationship with the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association, which is an association of the Kentucky farms around the state. And so we have a working relationship. They have been not only supporters, but they've been advocates of the program as we teach our kids horsemanship. We have many other relationships, such as the Kentucky Horse Park, Churchill Downs. Alicia represents the National Thoroughbred Racing Association, and she has been a true advocate, a true partner in what we do. As I always say during my speeches, I am the biggest name dropper around. So that is because we have developed many relationships, and quite frankly, I hesitate to move forward into naming them all because I'm going to forget a lot of them. So we have a great deal of very fruitful relationships with corporate entities, the equine industry, as well as in the general public, and received a lot of support to date.
All right, I think we have misplaced Leon for a moment, but hopefully we'll have him back soon. Alicia, since Ron, speaking of name dropping, since he name dropped you, do you want to say anything about your work with the Legacy Equine Academy?
Yeah, I said I was fortunate enough. Rod and I crossed paths last year, thankfully, before everything kind of went off its axis. And I really do feel like fate sort of brought us together. We were able to meet right at the moment when I had just, gone to the NTRA and presented them my idea with starting our own diversity initiative and talking about some things that we could do locally to try to get that off the ground. And that is when Ron and I met. And I said we were able to, one of the first things that he and I were able to work together on was taking an existing scholarship that the NTRA had with the University of Kentucky and sort of retooling that and making it a scholarship that in partnership with the Equine Academy to benefit the students there. And like I said, from there, we've really just kind of been able to build and grow and work on, on the advocacy side of things, the educational side of things. I think that is, and I can't overstate the importance of that, especially, with getting new and young people involved in the sport, is teaching them, about, like I said, the history, the African-American history of the sport, because so many of them, they don't know about it because, the jockeys and the trainers and the owners, they were basically forced out of the sport due to Jim Crow and other, back in the day. And so many of them don't even realize that this sport really was built on the back of the Black community and people of color. So it's educating them about that and letting them know that this industry is an option for them, that they can look at this as a career option, not just working on the backside, but on the front side too. In kind of, like I said, these C-suite positions, these positions of power and influence. And that's where we really can affect changes, getting more people of color into those positions of power and influence.
We've got Leon back. Leon, maybe you could share with us a little bit about the project to preserve African-American turf history.
Yeah, so PATH, which is the acronym, we founded PATH in 2007 on two fronts. Really, the first was a fan development initiative, and the second, it was really about aligning more of a national marketing message to the African-American community. Just with my background and family experience within the equine industry, the Kentucky Derby is one of our nation's most iconic sporting events. And that disruption that was born out of Jim Crow in terms of the African-American influence and contributions back to the sport, it still existed today. So in short, we really took up the banner as far as how do we reconnect not only a generation and hoping to inspire and develop, and cultivate more fans, but how do we get corporate America on board and creating more messaging targeted towards our community as it relates to thoroughbred racing? Because what we do know from thoroughbred racing is that it serves as the foundation of all sports in North America, being the first professional sport or industry, I should say. And so, when we created PATH, we had, hoped that there would be a twofold process to it. And one, the fan engagement, and two, the corporate engagement in terms of creating a national message and letting this industry lead the way when it comes to a national message around diversity and inclusion, because again, we have a rich kinship there. And, again, when you look at the successes and achievements within the sport, I think it could serve as a benchmark to really springboard just a more positive and diverse, inclusive message, especially around the Kentucky Derby.
Hey, Leon, when you and I spoke, one of the things we talked about is the really cinematic quality of the life of some of the African-American pioneers in the sport, like Jimmy Wingfield and Isaac Murphy. And a question I had gotten from somebody through our website is, has there been efforts to try to turn those into cinema, to try to get either documentaries or movies going about some of those early stars?
Funny you should say that. So again, That's really at the foundational level. Yes, there is. I wish I had my poster board up, but we're working with a California-based production company, James Walton Productions, as we speak. We've incorporated one part, because Isaac's is very vast, as well as Mr. Wingfield, but one part of Isaac's success. And if anybody remembers or recalls the great match race in 1890 between Isaac Murphy riding Salvatore and Snapper Garrison aboard Tenny. And that was really at the genesis of where the nation was going in terms of Jim Crow, the whole separate but equal ideology of racial segregation, and where the hierarchy of where African Americans fit in. So reading Isaac's story, one thing you will understand about Isaac and how he achieved the all-time winningest percentage. Isaac was, obviously born into slavery, but he was so, let's just use the word inspired to set an example as an African-American male in the 19th century, that it literally drove him to a point of just trying to prove his equalness and Black excellence. And so out of that comes the match of the century between Isaac and aboard Salvatore and Ed Snapper Garrison aboard Tenny, which was one of the top sporting rivals of that time. I'm not going to give a lot of it away, other than say that whole story, that narrative. We're working on a screenplay. We just completed the poster and sort of the cinematic look of everything, and the story and script is being written as we speak, and it's being shopped across production houses. And it ironically. Once this story is produced and headed to distribution, whatever format that might be, this will mark the first time, and let's just use the Derby, for example, in the 147-year history of the Kentucky Derby, that an African-American equine-based film in the thoroughbred industry would have come to fruition, because there are phenomenal stories of achievement and overcoming obstacles far beyond what we ever experienced. And so we're just trying to do our part to really get these narratives and get these stories out there, because we know that they'll serve as an inspiration to current and future generations. And by the way, Isaac's story, the story that we're working on, I will give the title away, and it's titled Photo Finish. And that's a story within the story of thoroughbred racing, Isaac Murphy, and today's sports programming.
Respond to, but these are major, billion-dollar industries that
batter down the doors and make it more equitable and more inclusive. What are some of the obstacles that you all faced in getting these companies and these industries on your side? And how did you overcome them?
Well, I'll take on that first question. So I think from our vantage point, we always use a narrative of it's good for your bottom line. And when you can really weave that into the business sector, it just makes sense. But as it related to the Kentucky Derby, again, it was an easy sell, because there were no national programming. We just didn't have anything. And you see these layers of stories and achievement, and to know that your state, your community, and your city is home to one of America's, if not the world's, top sporting attractions, then it becomes easy, because when you go into these boardrooms and corporations and you say, hey, we want to do something to really drive a message of diversity and inclusion, it's hard to argue that position. So from our vantage point, it was I won't say it's easy, because the work is never easy, but it was necessary.
you don't mind. I think what we all do adds value to the sport, and the sponsors and advocates and supporters that we have look at supporting us as an investment to the future of the sport. The sport has spoken publicly about having a greater, broader audience in the next generation. And so we offer a very compelling story to move the needle on that particular success. And so there's power in diversity and inclusion. Other sports have proven it. The NBA, NASCAR, the National Tennis Association. All of these sports have broadened their footprint through diversity and inclusion. And so with the rich history of African Americans in the sport of thoroughbred racing, why wouldn't there be a bigger, broader effort with new ideas and new opportunities? And so that has been the song that we've sang in basically delivering economic impact over time to the sport, whether it be ownership, whether it be professional opportunities and broad-based professional opportunities. And so we're excited to commit to the sport, basically a greater pool to pull in that direction.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Ron and Leon both said in terms of the bottom line. You know, when you're working with in sports, and it's an industry, right? And it's a business. And so appealing to the bottom line and letting these organizations know that inclusion and equity in the long run is going to be financially and fiscally a sound decision. I think that's really important. I also think that, I just think about gathering the voices of so many folks who love this sport, whether it's ice hockey or thoroughbred racing, and utilizing those voices and utilizing the power of those voices to let the industry know that this is a concern, not just for financial gain, but this is a concern of people who are involved in the sport, and people who love the sport want to see it be better. And the large organizations have the power to make policy shifts and have the power to, hit hiring counts and think about the disparities in the front offices and the C-suites and in the staffing, and how internships are given and where they look to do their hiring. And I think those types of things, like Alicia said, are where we're going to be able to facilitate change, is once we utilize our voices and we let these organizations know that this is something that the masses want to see. I think that we'll be able to make these changes and drag these industries along kicking and screaming, because it is a financially sound decision, because this is the direction that other sports are moving into. Our sports need to do the same if they want to remain relevant. We talk about growing the game in hockey, and what better way to grow the game than to authentically include marginalized communities like the Black community, like the LGBTQ community. In order to have these authentic connections to the community, we've got to hire from those communities. We've got to listen to the voices from those communities. And so that's what our organization is all about. It's about amplifying these voices, sharing the knowledge that come from these communities that will help diversify and make the sports that we love even better.
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to ask all three of our wonderful panelists is, I think we've all had people reach out to us and say, that they want to help out, that they want to be part of the solution, but they don't quite know how to go about it, or they feel like, because they're not in a position of power and influence, that they kind of feel like, they don't know where to begin, or that their efforts may be futile. What advice would you give to somebody, to a person who, maybe is not in a position of power and influence, but still wants to affect change?
Well, I'll take that one pretty quick, because what the Black Girl Hockey Club recently did back at the end of last year was launch an advocacy campaign called the Get Uncomfortable campaign. And this is really, geared towards folks who want to make a culture shift within the sport, but they really don't know where to start. And a place for them to start is our Get Uncomfortable pledge. It kind of runs through what issues of racism look like in hockey, and then it asks people to take up the mantle of anti-racism in sports, and whether it's on the ice or off the ice, in the rink or in the community, it asks folks to get uncomfortable. And so what I tell people is to have those difficult conversations with your peers, with your coworkers, with your family members, and keep having them. Amplify Black and BIPOC voices. Use your platform, whatever it may be, to share the work and the inspirations of people of color within this sport, in order to just diversify folks' feeds, right? I also just I tell people to think outside the box. A lot of times, they're getting their interns and their new hires from the same pool as everybody else. And I just tell them to think outside of that. If you're looking at colleges for interns, why not look at HBCUs or the historically Black colleges and universities, or Black student unions? Organizations like that already have ready-made folks who want to work in these businesses, but perhaps don't realize that sports like thoroughbred racing are available to Black students, that there's even an entry point for them in that industry. And so I tell folks who want to make a change, even if you're not a CEO in your company, you've got a little bit of hiring power. Maybe you've got a chance to work with interns, or you're able to regulate the content of your work newsletter or something like that. There's always a way that you can support BIPOC folks within your industry, whether large or small. So taking those little steps and just being brave and continuous with your actions is the best way to go about being anti-racist, because this is a long-term work. This isn't a one-off. This isn't a sprint. It's a marathon, and it's exhausting and it's tiring, but it's worth it at the end. And so I just tell people, be brave, work with what you have within your circles. And when the time comes, take a break, take care of yourself, because it's not easy. And it's going to be, if you're doing anti-racism work, whether it's in sports or business or education, it's going to be hard and it's going to be thankless. And so, making sure that you have that community, making sure that you have that support system, and that you're taking care of your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, all of those things make it important. They're an important part of doing advocacy work.
Alicia, I would at this point to address your question is to have those in the audience who are interested in supporting and being a resource to our program. And support and being a resource comes in many fashions, whether it be investment, whether it be volunteerism, whether it be working to develop new avenues of activities. You can reach out to me directly at Ron Mack, RONMACK, at legacyequine.org. Again, that's Ron Mack at legacyequine.org. You can also join our Facebook page at the Legacy Equine Academy KY, and really take a look at the history of what we've done and all the activities that we do have to broaden the perspective of young people and offer them new opportunities. So I would be remiss if I did not offer those opportunities to reach out to us if you feel that what we do is not only compelling, but it's a opportunity to build an economic impact through the thoroughbred industry, not only here in Kentucky, but nationally as well as globally.
And Alicia, to echo Ron and Renee's sentiment, I think just leveraging your power, your voice. Again, whether that's being a part of a social media community, doing on the ground work within your respective city, state, or community. There's ample opportunity to really just get involved and support initiatives around diversity and inclusion. And with respect to the work that Ron and I do, here in Kentucky, I think we see that there are growing organizations around the country, from New York to Maryland to Detroit, Atlanta. There's numerous organizations that are serving as a grassroots springboard into driving a diverse and inclusive message, primarily around this history, but also across other sports. I think the great Nelson Mandela said it best at the 2000 World Sports Awards. He recognized that sports has the power to unite. It has the power to bring people together like little else does. And you see that at sporting events when we can attend sporting events. People from all walks of life rally around their favorite team, their favorite color, and that's really the harnessing and leveraging the power of sports, finding something that is meaningful to you, and lifting your voice and serving as a resource to support various organizations, because it's long-term work, a little reward other than knowing that you're making a difference. But we do this, because we understand that the work is necessary, and long term we hope to make a difference. We hope to open doors, and we hope to impact these organizations, their bottom line. But it has to be in a strategic way that through this exchange we benefit as well in terms of generating new opportunities.
I wanted to jump in and put this out to all three of you, if I could, and anybody else who wants to jump in as well. But Renee, you have this Get Uncomfortable campaign that you were just talking about, and we've been talking. We always talk about these issues as sort of a win-win. We can all do this and everybody wins. So I'm curious as to whose comfort you're talking about, why you chose that title, and how important discomfort is to this process.
Well, I do think that when you are a non-Black, non-BIPOC person, talking about race can be a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not 100% on that because I'm Black, but I get the gist that can be the feeling. And so it's all about having these uncomfortable conversations. And I don't think that, it is the Get Uncomfortable campaign is definitely aimed at our allies to consider how they can be better allies, how they can work together with organizations like Black Girl Hockey Club and other organizations that are uplifting BIPOC communities. So it's all about our allies getting a little bit uncomfortable. And it's not necessarily, change is not comfortable, right? And so that's the theme, the essence of our campaign. It's an advocacy campaign. It's meant to shine a light on some of the issues that we're seeing in hockey, but we're seeing them across all the sports and in all of our industries and institutions, because racism and white supremacy are the basis of a lot of our institutions, and until we address those things, they're not going to get changed. And even saying that out loud can make people feel uncomfortable. And so we're committed to having these uncomfortable conversations. And Black Girl Hockey Club is here to help facilitate those conversations and help guide those conversations and to help encourage folks to keep having those conversations, because we know that even though they're uncomfortable, they're incredibly necessary. And until we acknowledge our history, we're never going to be able to change it.
Ron and Leon, are you guys seeing, is your work leading to uncomfortable conversations?
Well, Ron, and I'll take this one. I think, Frank, as it relates to the work that we do, it's hard to argue with history, right? So it's hard to argue with the successes that have already been established. And from an uncomfortable standpoint, again, it's just revisiting the conversation and extending that in today's real world, and driving a narrative around the bottom line. Because let's be frank, thoroughbred racing is a sport that's struggling. It's struggling to drive new fans, and it's struggling in the diversity and inclusion narrative. But it also has a tremendous platform if it leverages the collective history, and it shows just how important at the foundational level that was to the sport of thoroughbred racing. Because let's face it, great wealth was established on the backs of Black athletes and trainers and owners. And once the explosion of the talent base, of the consumer base, happen over time, we see a sport that loses its value. So therein lies, the silver lining, if you will, is that we have proof, substantiated proof that the models around diversity and inclusion are important to any industry. Because if you're going to grow your base, your fan engagement, and your sport, you have to reach across from and work with people who look different from you.
I think what the other sports here, NASCAR and the NBA and the NFL and the National Tennis Association, I think they realize that a lack of diversity can have consequences. And so I think that to influence a sport with the history that Leon just laid out, you must have a unified voice to really move the needle in the way of impacting the culture of a sport. And along those lines, with the work that the Legacy Equine Academy does, and the work with Path and Leon and his team, we have begun the initial stages of partnering our organizations to have a bigger, broader, greater impact in the way of developing diversity and inclusion. Again, from top to bottom, in the way of ownership, in the way of viewership, in the way of a broader audience, in the way of a pipeline, a pathway for young people to enter into the sports via many directions. And so we're so excited that although our two organizations will continue their missions and grow their missions, we have unified our efforts moving forward to build a more powerful, more compelling voice to the industry and to the population at large. So we're extremely excited to move forward together and again build the equity, inclusion that's so dearly needed, as Leon stated so well.
We just have a couple of minutes left. This hour's flown by for me listening to all of you. Want to give each of you a chance to kind of give us a parting shot, a minute or so, if there's anything we didn't ask you, or that you would like to sort of leave our viewers and listeners with. I'm struck, Renee, as a white person, I can confirm talking about race is not always comfortable for white people. I work at a school that has a very, very deep commitment to anti-racism work, which we work on every week at school. And this is a community that's really comfortable as much as one can be talking about this, but it's still really hard. And I am not sure that most sports industries necessarily evince that same willingness to be uncomfortable. And if we had another, hour to talk with you, I would love to hear about how you convince people who don't need to be made uncomfortable to be willing to take that step. And so you can respond to that or not respond to that, but maybe we could just kind of, go down the row, start with you, Renee. What's final comments from you?
I think what you said is spot on, because a lot of our allies do not need to get uncomfortable, right? But that is the history of racism in our country, is that there's been a very, very long time where non-marginalized folks have turned a blind eye to racism, sexism, homophobia in our communities. And I think right now in sports and outside of sports, it's a watershed moment, because we are gathering allies. We are gathering non-BIPOC folks to take up the mantle of issues in the BIPOC community. And, like Leon or like Ron said, it's important to understand that we have to work with people who don't look like us, who do not have our cultural background. But I've said it, that you don't have to be Black and you don't have to be a girl to be part of Black Girl Hockey Club. You just have to support Black women and our mission. And our mission is to support Black women. So if you support our mission, then you're part of the Black Girl Hockey Club. You can be part of this movement to help shift hockey culture. And one of the coolest things that I've been able to do is reach across various sports. I had a conversation this morning with a young woman who works in softball, and to be able to talk with you all in Thoroughbred Racing, it just makes our voices stronger, right? And it makes our audiences and our industries understand that this is an important issue. It's not isolated. This is something we need to be looking at across all of our industries in order to make a better and equitable world for the kids that are coming after us.
Ron, do you have a parting shot for us?
Well, again, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we do appreciate the platform that we have here today, because that's what it takes for a true conversation between a cross section of races to have real conversations. And uncomfortable is not a bad thing. I think more things get accomplished when there are folks that are uncomfortable, because it makes them think in a bigger, broader way. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, and I'm excited to be a part of greater change here in the future in the way of thoroughbred racing and our society at large. So I want to thank everyone for allowing Legacy Equine Academy to be a part of this conversation.
And before we turn to you, Leon, for your part of the chat, I also want to say we will post links to all of these companies, organizations, which are nonprofits, and you can contribute to them. Maybe you can't storm the battalions and try to make your way in or donate time, but if you are able to donate financially, you can do so to these organizations, and we'll make sure everybody gets that information. Leon.
Well, I'm going to speak in the equine space and really, recognize at the brand level, at the corporate level, brands like Woodford Reserve, who've not only are they the presenting sponsor of the Kentucky Derby, but they recognize the value of the history and driving a more diverse and inclusive message. That's really what at the core of what we're doing is really driving that type of commitment. Because again, for just staying in the thoroughbred racing space, horse racing uniquely, it's a foundational sport. So its voice has to be a little larger, and its message has to be a little greater. And I think it's just a matter of time before, in my view, that this sport will make the necessary changes to help it grow, but grow opportunities at large as well, because it's a very dynamic sport, and it can definitely impact change.
That seems like a good place to leave it. This has been amazing and just so much food for thought here for all of us, I think. And those of us who want the best for the thoroughbred industry, those of us who want the best for our country and generations still to come, just really, really good stuff. So thank you, Renee Hess. Thank you, Leon Nichols. Thank you, Ron Mack. Thank you, Alicia Hughes. Thank you, Teresa Gennaro. This has been really, really interesting stuff. I just last housekeeping things. Thank you to everybody who's watched this over the last hour. So grateful to you for joining us. The next one of these is tentatively scheduled for April 7th. That's 3 weeks hence, also at 5 o'clock. More details will follow on the racingbiz.com. And again, thank you for joining us, and thanks to our tremendous panel and to my co-organizers. Really exciting stuff, and really looking forward to the next one.